Hey guys, today I have 3 documentaries to recommend. I'm not ranking them in order because people died in each one and that's not very nice. I also am not giving trigger warnings because that's not how reality works, and if you've been here a while you already know the kinds of movies I watch, so yeah. I'm currently going through coffee withdrawal, so if I sound unenthused, well, more unenthused than usual, I hope it doesn't detract from the video. And oh my god, we're ignoring my lip liner today too. I was very heavy-handed because I rushed. I look like fucking... The first movie is Grizzly Man. This was directed by Werner Herzog and released in 2005. It follows the life and death of Timothy Treadwell, a bear enthusiast who was almost completely eaten by a bear while at Katmai National Park in Alaska. He died in 2003, but the film uses footage Treadwell had recorded years before during his observations of wild animals. He'd founded the organization Grizzly People and had decided that it was his mission to protect the bears from supposed poachers. According to him, he was tough enough and knew the language of the bears. Because of this self-appointed mission and sense of grandiosity, he ignored every park rule meant to protect both humans and the bears. He would pet them, feed them, and constantly turn his back to them. That's precisely why he's dead. Well, I'm not saying he deserved what happened to him, but it was 100% preventable. This was uncomfortable for me while I was watching because my opinion kept wavering. The opening scene was enough to convince me that he was a nutcase, but as the movie progressed, I'd feel bad for my judgment. Then I'd see scenes of him bonding with different animals, and I found him kind of endearing. As soon as the clips would disarm me, bits of his past would be revealed, and I just couldn't trust him. I understand he's dead, and I'm not being disrespectful, but you'll probably feel the same way if you watch this and you understand his failed ambitions. I was left with the impression that Treadwell was an insecure man who struggled with addiction. I know certain addictions are not the same as drugs and alcohol, but I wonder if he was wired to get intense adrenaline rushes from this kind of behavior. There's something called transfer addictions, and it's when an addict attempts to heal their disease, but they end up slipping into another addiction, and I wonder if that could have played a role. Either way, I'm not going to moralize and disrespect a dead person. I'm sure there was part of him that genuinely wanted to help the bears, but he went about it the wrong way, and that's just a fact. There's a term called victim blaming, and I feel like people use that word very loosely, and it frustrates me because there's a difference between blame and responsibility. You have a responsibility to protect yourself from harm, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're to blame if something bad happens to you. For example, I'm not going to walk around in a mini skirt and high heels at 2 a.m. in the South Bronx because that's a high crime area and there's the risk of having every hole in my body violated. I know you're not allowed to say things like this these days, but I'm half Caribbean and half Central American, and I lived in a rotten ghetto for most of my life, so nobody can tell me how to feel. Thanks. I liked that Herzog's tone was tactful while acknowledging the mistakes Treadwell had made. He never encouraged this behavior, this very risky behavior that he felt was well-intentioned. If you love nature and the outdoors, give this one a watch. I saw my first bear outside of a zoo just over a year ago, and I'm pushing 30, but yeah, Alaska has always fascinated me. I think it's gorgeous there, and I love cold weather. Treadwell's eccentricity was also very interesting to watch, but I'll leave it at that. During the attack, which was captured on audio, his girlfriend refused to leave his side. The clip hasn't been released despite claims that the ones online are authentic, but in it, you can hear her hitting the bear repeatedly with a frying pan and Timothy begging her to run away. On a lighter note, if you'd like to admire some bears from a safe distance, there are countless videos of these glorious fatzos on YouTube. Every October, a tournament in this very park takes place. It's called Fat Bear Week. You can watch live streams of the bears that have prepared for hibernation and vote for the roundest of them all. I don't know about you, but looking at fat animals makes me feel like life is worth living, so check the links in the description if you can relate. You won't be disappointed. Number 2 is Tales of the Grim Sleeper from 2014, directed by Nick Broomfield. This covers the murders committed by American serial killer Lonnie Franklin, who killed at least 10 women between 1984 and 2007. This one's particularly upsetting because it sheds light on class issues. Most of Franklin's victims were prostitutes who were addicted to drugs, and I'm sure these women would have garnered more media attention if they had been successful and wealthy. I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum, but I don't want any radicals here. So we get insights into class differences through interviews with a victim named Pamela Brooks, a former prostitute who survived a night she'd spent with Franklin. The director wasn't welcome in the neighborhood when he began filming, so it helped to have Pam in his car. It's because of her that people were more willing to talk, including other victims and prostitutes. She's an interesting character, and I feel like she carried this whole documentary. I doubt the documentary would have been the same without her. 3 other key interviewees were Lonnie Franklin's close friends. I'm amazed that they went from hurling racial slurs at Broomfield to becoming willing participants in this project. They started off being protective of their friend who hadn't yet gone to trial, but they eventually began revealing intimate details about him. Red flags that they'd overlooked because they thought they could trust him. I'm glad they ended up doing the right thing because they'd done some questionable things with him. They'd sought out prostitutes themselves, and yeah, there's a bunch of strange stuff that they did as friends. I'm not comparing them at all, but yeah, this documentary has at least 3 major plot twists, and one of them is an interview with Franklin's son. I don't rewatch many documentaries, but I've watched this twice, and it's hands down one of the most chilling viewing experiences for me. I'm not gonna get into too much detail, but I've known sociopaths, and it's so crazy how many of them follow certain patterns. The person I knew wasn't a serial killer, but they were a sexual deviant, and that's another reason why these kinds of stories hit a nerve. For many of these people, it's only a matter of time before they assault or kill, and I hate knowing that I share a planet with these people. I know a lot of people believe that addiction is a choice, and they take a dim view of prostitutes and drug addicts, but these are complex issues that are hard to solve. The neighborhood I grew up in, for example, has reverted to a shithole full of drug addicts and prostitutes, so I'm not blind to all the problems they bring, but a lot of them deserve help, and I don't want to imagine the trauma that many of these people faced in their childhoods to lead them down these paths. At the end of the day, Franklin's victims were humans who felt pain. They didn't deserve their fates just because they lived lives of vice. They were once little girls with dreams and ambitions, and I feel sick to my stomach when I think that they were once giggling little babies. Broomfield and Pam's tenacity is commendable, and they did a great job giving voices to the victims, their families, and their communities. The Grim Sleeper was sentenced to death after a 3-month trial but died of natural causes in his cell 4 years later. The final documentary, Streetwise, is from 1984. Hands down, one of the most haunting documentaries I've watched in my life. This one follows several kids on the streets of Seattle during the 80s, many of whom are loosely connected. It was directed by Martin Bell a year after his wife, Mary Ellen Mark, had written an article about them in Life magazine. Titled Streets of the Lost, it highlighted the struggles of abandoned and runaway children surviving on the streets. I think you guys can imagine the kind of abuse these children endured before they ended up on the streets. I'm sure you can also imagine what they had to do to make money. So even though the documentary shows us 9 kids and their stories, Erin Blackwell, the girl on the poster, is the main focus. She was a 14-year-old prostitute who went by the nickname Tiny. Tiny spent a lot of time on the streets, but she also went back and forth to her home. In one of these scenes, her mom referred to Tiny's prostitution as a phase. What kind of out-of-touch moron speaks so blithely about their child being raped and then doesn't realize that she's felt so miserably as a parent that her child would rather let crusty old fucks violate her than stay in her own home? So this is just one example of the kind of neglect they had to deal with. I recommend this to anyone who has watched Out of the Blue. It has that same essence, and this might sound weird, but the main character in that one, CB, felt like if Tiny and her boyfriend Rat melded into one person. I've talked about that movie before, so I'll leave the link to my video below if you missed it. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the scenes were staged, but most of them felt genuine. And one of the most memorable moments for me was the opening scene. It shows Rat, who is Tiny's boyfriend, jumping off a bridge, and there's a voiceover of him explaining how much he loves the feeling of flying. The scene kind of felt like a dream, but it's a bittersweet moment because he talks about how he hates coming back to reality, and made me very sad because I don't like knowing that children feel that way. This didn't feel exploitative to me, and it's necessary viewing for basically everyone. You don't think of street kids when you picture America, but for decades they were a thing. There were a few tender moments between these kids, whether they were friends or in relationships at 12, right? And I couldn't help but wonder how bittersweet they must have been in that moment. Nothing lasts forever, and these kids must have come to that realization way quicker than their peers. A lot of these kids met tragic ends. One died of AIDS, several died of overdoses, and one of them fell victim to the Green River serial killer, Gary Ridgway. Bell followed up on Rat and Tiny. In 2021, he released a 14-minute interview with Rat, who got sick of life on the streets, sobered up, and started his own family. Unfortunately, Tiny's life hasn't improved much. She too has become a grandparent, but her family has gotten caught in the cycle of poverty and addiction. That is all for today. If you missed my last countdown of disturbing documentaries, it's also in the description. Don't forget to tell your family and friends you love them, and remember that there are people praying for your problems, and that's not me trying to minimize your pain. I'm just trying to encourage you to see things from a different perspective and hopefully even feel a little better. I'm not trying to make you feel worse. Thank you for watching. Please go do something kind for yourself and take it easy. Bye.